Congressman, we're delighted you're here before the subcommittee, and we look forward to your testimony, and thank you for being here.
Well, I do appreciate that, Mr. Chairman and the Ranking Member, for allowing me to testify here today. It's an honor to be before the Energy and Commerce Committee. In fact, I've never been before the Energy and Commerce Committee before, so it really is an honor and a privilege for me to be here today. Our nation has been blessed with great abundance of natural resources. Consider these astounding facts. ANWR potentially contains 10 billion barrels of oil. The Outer Continental Shelf is estimated to hold 85 billion barrels of oil and 420 trillion cubic feet of natural gas, and over 2 trillion barrels of oil are held in oil shale deposits, more than are contained in all the countries in the Middle East combined. Additionally, our nation has nearly 250 billion tons of recoverable coal reserves, which is the estimated equivalent of 800 billion barrels of oil, and constitutes more than 3 times Saudi Arabia's proven oil reserves. Unbelievably, our government has chosen not to utilize these resources fully, despite the repeated promises to achieve energy independence by both Democrats and Republican administrations and Congresses alike. But continued inaction is unacceptable with stubbornly high unemployment, lackluster economic growth, widespread unrest in the Middle East, and the prospect of escalating gas prices punishing American families. Nothing done by our government in the past 4 decades has actually helped to achieve the goal of energy independence, or for that matter, kept energy prices affordable for American families and businesses. The reverse is true. We are more dependent on foreign oil today than ever before, and far more economically vulnerable than at any point in our nation's history. If we summon the political will to enact this legislation before the committee, H.R. 909 would reverse this course, immediately lower energy prices, and finally deliver on the unfulfilled promises of recent decades. The energy roadmap is not a radical alternative to current energy policy. That is, while we can all agree that we need a comprehensive approach, this approach must be market-based and gradual. If we are to achieve true energy independence, I predict that any other approach will ultimately be rejected by the American people. The energy roadmap would lift restrictions on development and extraction of resources in ANWR and OCS. This could create up to 2 million jobs, and maybe even just the construction of these jobs would create another 100,000 construction jobs. The roadmap recognizes that the dependence on any one fuel source is dangerous and short-sighted. It also recognizes that the American people have made it clear that they do see the merit in federal resources to develop and transition to alternative energy sources and to reduce carbon emissions when economically and technologically feasible. The status quo does not provide adequate support to the development of alternative energy. It is not necessarily a question of resources as much as it is a question of the appropriate structure to deliver support for the development of renewable energy. For example, while many renewable energy companies support the current production tax credit, they are frustrated with its lack of predictability and that it can get caught up in the legislative process and lapse. Accordingly, H.R. 909 would provide the financial resources and structure necessary to transition our economy to renewable and advanced energy alternatives. It would do this by depositing the new federal lease and royalty revenues, estimated to be over $500 billion in the next 30 years, into a trust fund. These dollars would then be made available to renewable energy producers through a reverse auction. This market-based mechanism would ensure that the cheapest and most efficient technology thrives, while simultaneously opening the alternative energy market to greater innovation and competition. Importantly, the roadmap would not end the credit. Rather, it would give an alternative to energy entrepreneurs to choose to receive the credit or to forgo it to receive support through the reverse auction. Moreover, the support provided under the energy roadmap for the development of renewable energy would not be subject to the federal budget or the legislative process. Put simply, it provides the best mechanism to develop, produce, and transition to alternative energy. Another component of the roadmap would establish or would mandate that 200 reactors permits be granted by 2040. This bill would provide new streamlined regulations and a system to manage the waste that will drive private sector investments in these facilities, which today are stalled as a result of red tape, lawsuits, and parochial concerns. Nuclear power in my estimation, is essential to achieving an abundant and affordable supply of electricity to fuel our nation's economy. H.R. 909 would enhance our national security by removing barriers to expand our nation's secure coal supplies to fill the tanks of the American military vehicles and jets. In fact, the bill's near-term goal is to produce at least 300,000 barrels of CTL, coal to liquid. Such supply would equal the amount of fuel consumed daily by the U.S. military for domestic operations. The American people are looking to us for leadership. They know intuitively that we are running out of time, and they are worried about the future of our country and for their and our country's future for their children. They have given us the opportunity to offer solutions to this and other big problems. My fellow colleagues, it's time for us to act, and I really do appreciate Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, for having the opportunity to testify here today.
Well, thank you, Mr. Nunes, for that testimony, and I'll recognize myself for a period of questions, and then we'll recognize Mr. Waxman for the same purpose. In your testimony, you talked a little bit about a reverse auction for a fund to encourage more development of renewable fuels. Would you elaborate a little bit on the way this reverse auction would work?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. I believe that despite the ranking member's testimony at the beginning, I think this is something that is new, is innovative, and it would change the way that alternative energy is deployed. Basically, to put it simply, you take the royalty revenues, which some people estimate to be $500 billion over 30 years. It could be higher, it could be lower, but it's a significant amount of money. And what you do is essentially that money's there, and it acts as a reverse auction, so the lowest bidder wins. So if I could maybe give you an example, let's say that someone, one person has windmills that they want to put up in California, and someone has a windmill farm that they want to put up in Nevada. And if one company thinks that they need $100 to get their project off the ground in California, let's say it's $100, but in Nevada, that company for the same size project only needs $90. They would submit those bids, and it's per megawatt, and the Nevada company would win. So it basically gets to the cheapest way to deploy renewable energy, and this has been, I think, met with in the Silicon Valley and the entrepreneurial community in California. This has been well received throughout the energy companies that want to see changes to the way these technologies are deployed.
Now, is there an example of where this type of reverse auction has been implemented in other places and has been proven that it works very well?
Yeah, matter of fact, it's a great question, Mr. Chairman. I was quite embarrassed to learn that when I developed this legislation, I thought that I had developed something new. In fact, this is being used in Brazil. And to my knowledge, although I've not talked, I do co-chair the Brazilian caucus, which is even more of embarrassment that I didn't know that this was there. But from my understanding, it's working very well.
And they use it for the same purpose for the development of renewables?
Yes. And I think it would probably, for this committee, it would be worth your time maybe to look into that if you have another hearing.
We've heard a lot recently, particularly from our friends on the other side of the aisle, about removing production tax credits and other things from the oil industry. And without getting into a discussion about that proposal per se, I would like to just broaden it. And do you think it would be reasonable, or would it be helpful if we're going to have a debate about removing tax credits from the oil industry? In your view, should we have a debate about just removing incentives from all energy production?
In fact, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Camp and the Ways and Means Committee, we have been conducting a series of hearings on tax reform. And we've had many different companies from both foreign nationals and small businesses basically all say the same thing, that they would like to see the corporate tax rate reduced and would basically forego all of these types of little production tax credits and different tax credits that are out there. And so I think President Obama, you were at the meeting the other day, he indicated that this is something that he would like to do also. So I think simplifying the tax code, getting rid of all these credits would be something worthwhile, and that's what the Ways and Means Committee is working on.
And you all are working on that right now.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, in your proposal, you talk about licensing 200 new nuclear plants in a relatively short time. I forgot if you said 2040 or whenever it was. But recognizing that we have this significant issue of how do we dispose of this waste, because the administration has basically stopped Yucca Mountain after the expenditure of $15 billion and after judgments against the federal government of about another $15 billion, and after taxpayers and energy users have paid the fee for providing funding for this. How do you propose that we would get rid of this waste?
Well, one of what I tried to achieve in drafting this legislation was that tried to create a scenario where the Congress forces an administration to act one way or the other on Yucca Mountain and reprocessing and a whole host of issues. Because as you know, it seems like every president, no matter if it's a Republican or Democrat, they're all for nuclear power, yet nothing ever happens. Right. And I think that our country, I think the most significant innovation in the last 100 years, from my perspective, is the development of nuclear power. Right. And I think we've been set back in this country over the last 4 decades because we really have not invested in new nuclear technology. And we are in real danger of falling behind China, who, some folks estimate that they're on their way to build over 200 nuclear reactors. We don't really know, but I think they are building several dozen right now that are being built or in the process of it. So, what this bill does is it basically forces the administration to say yes or no, and it develops a time frame so that we would either know that Yucca Mountain will be used or it will not be used, but we need to get to the bottom of that and get it, either stop it or start it.
Well, thank you, Mr. Nunes. At this time, I recognize Mr. Waxman for his 5-minute question period.
Thank you very much for your testimony, and I think I might have been a little too harsh in my opening statement. I do want to consider your idea because I've long believed that we need to have market mechanisms to try to drive the results that we want. I don't think we can decide the winners and losers. We ought to say what we want to achieve and help the entrepreneurs in this country unleash them and let them go forward and profit when they accomplish the goals we want. That's what we try to do, not to everybody's satisfaction in the cap and trade bill, because we said if you can figure out new technology and ways to reduce the carbon emissions, it will be to your economic benefit. You'll be able to have a clear profit for it. You seem to be doing that in a very different way, but nevertheless you're trying to accomplish something that I find attractive, and I want to understand this more from you and from other witnesses later on.
Absolutely.
As I understand it, in order to be eligible for the reverse auction, a renewable energy project developer has to have a power purchase agreement in place. And the price in that contract is essentially the bid in this reverse auction. It would seem that because the prices will already be set in the contract, generators will not be able to change their bids as the auction proceeds, and the price-driving mechanism of a traditional reverse auction will not be available. I assume the intent of the provision is to drive down the price of renewable energy. Isn't that what you're trying to?
That's correct.
And do you anticipate generators breaking or renegotiating power purchase agreements in order to lower their bids?
Well, one of the things, Mr. Chairman, and I do appreciate your comments as it relates to the reverse auction. It was a very difficult provision to draft, and we've spent several years doing it. You may remember that there in EPAC of whatever year that was, '05, there was something similar for renewable fuels that was put in. However, and the President actually has, I think, $150 million in his budget for that proposal, but the way that the law was drafted and then how the regulations were written basically there's never been any money put into it, and there doesn't seem to be any interest from the renewable fuel community to utilize it. So what we attempted to do here was to keep it as clear and basic as possible, so that you would have a clean way to run this auction. So, I mean, this is actually probably an expertise of yours in this committee, but we actually modeled it after originally before I knew that other people had tried this. We modeled it after the spectrum sales, the way that you auction off spectrum sales. So that was kind of our goal. And then asking when the regs would come out to basically have kind of 3 different levels, so that you could have one level for technological development and research. You would have kind of a mid-size level so that maybe small businesses and folks could utilize the program. And then you would have another pot at the highest level for the big energy companies to go out and build, big wind farms or big solar farms. That's the attempt of the legislation. I think one of the options here is just in this bill, some of the oil provisions have moved through the House already. And I think there is an opportunity for this committee to maybe take this reverse auction and move it by itself, spend some time, to make sure that it would work, in a bipartisan way, and maybe, get this bill marked up and get it out to the floor, just the reverse auction provision. I would be very supportive of something like that.
Do you have a concern that if there's a choice between a reverse auction and a production tax credit, that the production tax credit is more certain, and the groups, the businesses involved, will decide to forego the reverse auction and stick with the tax credit?
I think that there is the uncertainty now in the production tax credit business is leading to a more complicated deployment of renewable energy, renewable power. I think there's some people that can use these credits, some people can't. And I think, and because I think, what is it, the 2012, they lapse anyway. And if you just look down the road, I mean, when you have Republicans and Democrats agreeing that we need to get out of this tax credit business to some degree, I just don't think I think this program, having a trust fund in place where you take royalty revenue from oil and gas, is a way that would give some real certainty.
My staff has expired, but let me thank you for your hard work on this legislation. You're a highly respected member of our California delegation and in the House, and I want to look at this more carefully, because I do think we need a bipartisan approach, and I like the idea of something that will drive the markets rather than dictate the market.
Well, Mr. Chair, or Mr. Ranking Member, I would be willing to come and sit down with you and walk you through this, or your staff.
I don't walk through things when I'm sitting down, but I'll be glad to talk to you.
Well, in keeping with the procedures of our committee, Congressman Nunes, the chairman and ranking member, are the only ones that would be asking you questions today. But our staff has looked at your legislation. You have some really innovative approaches, like the reverse auction, and we're going to continue to look at that. And at some point, work with other committees and try to move something to address some of the problems that you're trying to address.